Hello to all of our members and welcome to another webcast with the CASW. This is our wrap-up event for National Social Work Month, and we are so happy that you're joining us today. My name is Joan Davis Whalen. I'm the President of the Canadian Association of Social Workers and Vice President for the North American region for the International Federation of Social Workers. Today, I have the honor of welcoming you to our final National Social Work Month event entitled Social Work is Essential. Social work events have been taking place across the world during March, so thank you for joining us and spending an hour listening to our incredible panel. Before we begin, we gather virtually these days. It becomes increasingly easy to forget our location and the lands of which we are gathered. If you are in the territory traditionally known as Ottawa, like CASW, you would be situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe peoples, who have always been stewards of the land we are grateful to be hosting this event on. We welcome you to take a moment and reflect on the territory of which you are tuning in from, and the many nations who have cared for this land since the beginning of time. Take a moment. Thank you. Our speakers today are champions, not only within the social work profession, but as community leaders and policymakers. We are joined today by 6 panelists that have been champions of social justice, advocacy, and academia, charting the way for vital structural change. The Canadian Association of Social Workers welcomed Senator Nancy Hartling, Senator for New Brunswick, Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, Senator for Nova Scotia East Preston, and Senator Margaret Dawn Anderson, Senator for the Northwest Territories, and their guests, Rina Arsenault, Susan Fitzke, and Princewell Ogban. The panel will aim to present the ideas, peoples, and places that have inspired them in their careers and what they are doing right now amid a global health crisis. I've got one item of housekeeping I have to mention before they can start, though. The panel will last about an hour, and please note that all the details you need, like how to access your certificate of attendance, additional resources, and other housekeeping information, it can be found at the bottom of your screen under the housekeeping icon. You can also resize, move around any of the elements you see on your screen to customize your viewing experience. So please take a moment and make the screen personalized. During the presentation, I encourage you to type in your questions at any time, as we'll be compiling them to ask the panel. So I'm going to ask as well today that if you put in a question in our Q&A, your name then will be entered in for a draw of our awesome Social Workers Essential masks. They are absolutely gorgeous, and we've just gotten them. But in order to be considered for the draw, you must ask a question. So that's your incentive today, to get one of those awesome masks that you can wear at work and bedazzle your friends with, and they'll be saying, "Where did you get that? I want one." So please do so today. And Alexandra will be contacting the winners via that process. So I am going to turn it over to our senators right now and their guests so that they can start. And I'll start first with Senator Hartling.
Thank you, Joan, and happy Social Work Month, the end of Social Work Month, to all of you listening from not only in Canada, but there's people in other parts of the world. So nice to see you again and have you here with us. So today, it's with pride and pleasure that I introduce my dear friend and longtime colleague, Rina Arsenault, an extraordinary Acadian social worker from my home province in New Brunswick. She studied at University of Moncton, both her bachelor's and master's in social work, and we've been connected for over 30 years. We started when we were very, very young, and through many projects in social work, but mostly around interpartner violence. And she's worked in Moncton, Fredericton, Ottawa in a number of positions. And you can see all that in her bio, and she's won many awards for her work. Rina is one of the most passionate, dedicated, and enthusiastic women that I know. She is well known in Canada and internationally for her knowledge and passion, especially around interpartner violence. Whether she is working with clients, public speaking, teaching, or leading a research team, her level of energy and compassion is commendable. Rina takes on challenges and raises her voice for human rights, advocating for social justice, especially for women and girls, and gender equality. We often have engaging conversations around difficult social issues, and we kind of wonder sometimes, well, when are things really going to change? But we got to keep working on it. Her upbringing in a large Acadian family gave her the joie de vivre that makes her someone special, who truly cares about others. And I am grateful to have her with us today. My sincere appreciation, Rina. So over to you.
Hartling.
Okay.
And everybody that knows me know that I have a very difficult time to limit myself. So I wrote my comments so that I really spend only the 10 minutes so I can get the other guests to have as much time also. So good afternoon, everyone. First, I wish to take this moment to thank the organizers of this panel for the opportunity to express my views on how essential social work is in our society, and to briefly discuss my thoughts on the wide array and importance of professional services we as social workers provide. Varied and important services that we deliver via a multitude of disciplines that include but are not limited to federal and provincial government representatives. For example, on this panel, 3 senators are social workers. How unbelievable is that? Federal and provincial governments departments, human resource departments, health and care agencies, mental health services, legal fields, and law enforcement. Services that are provided both as employees of these organizations and or via private practices. Now, the Code of Ethics of the CASW state the social work profession is dedicated to the welfare and self-realization of all people, the development and the disciplined use of scientific and professional knowledge, the development of resources and skill to meet individual groups, national and international changing needs and aspiration, and the achievement of social justice for all. If we were to unpack that statement from the CASW, it would show us how important we are in the world. I always believed that my profession chose me, but looking back, I now know that I chose it. It is one of the few professions that is at the core of that its core propels us to push for social action and social justice. It is in that mantra of social justice for all where I have found my calling, my passion, and the source of my drive and desire to push forward. In the 1970s, I'm showing my age, in the 1970s, I worked in a psychiatric ward, a women's ward. There, I saw firsthand the toll that family violence played on women, families, and society. The vast majority of women there had such sad stories. Many of them experienced violence and neglect at the hands of their loved one, and many were treated like throwaways. Working within the shelter system for abused women and children, I heard of ongoing basis atrocities that women and children were experiencing within the confine of their own home. How can we call this social justice when a person can manipulate and abuse the person they are supposed to love the most? Eventually, hoping to bring about change in the field of intimate partner violence, family violence, violence against women and children, I accepted a position with the Miriam Queen Ferguson Center for Family Violence Research at the University of New Brunswick as the Associate Director. In this position for 25 years plus, I was able to immerse myself in a field of study of violence and its effect on women, children, indeed family and community as a whole. Trying to understand the complexities of violence against women in our society through action-oriented collaborative research is essential in bringing about positive change. Evaluating and changing policies, services, programs as they better respond to the needs of the people they help is crucial and should always be a priority. It is also very important to understand that social economic status and intersectional aspects such as race, ethnicity, age, poverty, health create more complexities when responding to violence. Many complicated issues has been uncovered and documented by numerous professional researchers and those working on the front line. Bringing these issues to the light of day have positively impacted legislation and available support services. And yet, women continue to experience high level of gender-based violence. Social workers are essential because we believe in the strength of the individuals, in their uniqueness, in their resiliency. We understand that the trauma that people encounter may be the reason that they see us, but this trauma does not define them. There's so much more than their pain. There's so much more than the pain you're experiencing and expressing. Today, because of COVID-19 pandemic, parents are experiencing economic and social challenges while trying to be there for their spouse and children. Children who are often trying to gain an education via online schooling and or attending schools where masks, hand washing, and social distancing are the new norm. It is no wonder families are experiencing higher levels of stress and conflicts. Fundamentally, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, family violence is rooted in the issue of power and control. Isolation brought on by this pandemic is an important risk factor to remember. A November report, a November report from the Women's Shelter Canada found that 52% of shelters in the country saw an increase in the severity of the violence against women were experienced in the first 3 months of this pandemic. The report also noted a higher frequency in all forms of abuse. According to the report from the Canadian Femicide Observatory for Justice and Accountability, in 2020, a total of 160 women and girls were killed by violence in Canada. 54% of the women and girls were killed in non-urban areas, compared to 46%, despite the greater proportion of people living in urban areas in Canada. We need to understand this because services are more prominent in the urban area. The arrival of the pandemic prompted a unique global effort by social workers to revamp their services to meet the needs of both existing clients and millions of people whose lives have suddenly been thrown into turmoil because of the pandemic. We had to learn to work differently. We had to find ways to be there for our clients, our patients, our organizations, our students via the internet through platforms such as Zoom, Jabber, Microsoft Teams, just to name a few. We had to find ways to expand our services to meet new needs that grew by the minutes to get around the lockdown restrictions. The effort was in circumstances that might at first glance have seemed impossible for a profession that prides itself on having personal contact and relationship building at its core. In the report To the Top of the Cliff How Social Work Changed with COVID-19, the author states, however, what happened was a remarkable transformation of social work. Change in the delivery of social work services normally takes years. There are expectations where political decisions coincide with the aspiration of the communities and social service force. But these are rare. What happened in the first 6 months was something entirely new. A pandemic was prompted for social workers to be in nearly every country to be at the forefront of advocating for and leading change. Since my retirement in 2019 and the commencement of the pandemic, I have been involved in developing and instructing an online course entitled Introduction to Family Violence, a course offered through a family violence issue program at the Neil McQueen Ferguson Center. Students in this online course hailed from many locales from around the world. Although successfully delivered, it was not without challenges due to the pandemic. As an active member of the New Brunswick Mental Health Review Board, which is an independent tribunal with the mandate to conduct review panels hearing for mental health patients to ensure that patients receive fair, timely, and independent reviews, I observed the pandemic's serious impact on people with mental health. I have also observed its negative impact on some of the people, on the people who provide a wide variety of mental health support services. Indeed, some of my colleagues I've shared personal histories and experience of increased fear, anxiety, sleeplessness during this trying time. I have listened to my colleagues who have also stated that creating and working with bridges between various mental health services department organization has become more difficult. I've always been proud to be a social worker because for me, being a social worker provided me with the tools to fight for social justice. And that has always been my passion. Thank you for listening to me and allowing me to share my thoughts and my views with you on why social work is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we'll turn it over to Senator Thomas Bernard.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that very passionate speech. I love the focus on issues pertaining to violence against women. I have invited Princewell Oban to join us today, and I'm so delighted that he's here. He's a registered social worker. He has his bachelor's degree in social work from Dalhousie University, where I first met him, and his master's from the University of Waterloo. Princewell has devoted his entire career to issues of human rights, diversity, and inclusion, providing strategic advice to organizational leadership and diverse populations within government, private, public, nonprofit, education, and healthcare sectors. Princewell did his first social work placement with the Association of Black Social Workers, which is where I first worked very closely with him. Princewell, one of the reasons why I invited you to be on this panel today is because of the way that you have turned your passion for social justice into a career, and a career that you have done amazingly well in both the provinces of Nova Scotia and now the province of Ontario. And I recall when we met, I'll never forget the day that you visited me in East Preston, at my home in East Preston. Didn't tell me he was coming, didn't have my address, and literally just arrived in the community. Princewell, you arrived in the community, you stopped some young people and you said, you're looking for Wanda Thomas Bernard. And they told you exactly where I live. And the next thing I know, you're at my door. I value and appreciate you. And I'm so looking forward to what you have to share with us today on this panel as we talk about how social work is essential. Over to you, Princewell.
Thank you very much, Senator Wanda, for such a wonderful introduction. And thank you to the President of Canadian Association of Social Work and everyone that spent their time to organize this event. I'm always very excited when I'm given an opportunity to speak in events like this. As Senator Wanda had clearly said, Senator Wanda and I have a very long way, actually. Before even I applied into the School of Social Work, actually went to her office. I didn't know her, knocked and said, I've heard so much about you, I want to apply to study social works. And when I became a student, I worked with Senator Wanda closely, and we still work till today. Just recently, Senator Wanda was one of the speakers I invited to speak in the city of Ottawa of our Black History Month event. We had a panel on Black experience in leadership, towards a racially just workforce. So my career in social work is very, very essential, like so essential that sometimes, even as students, we don't know how much essential social work is. I would say from my experience, social work is the only career that cuts across all career spectrum in the world. So you can, as a social worker, you can work anywhere. The boundaries are limitless where you can work. But one thing about social work is, I tell people that social work is more of it's like a police job, but the only difference between social work and police is when police get in trouble, they get paid their salary till the court decides whether they're in trouble or not. But as a social worker, we don't have that protection that the police have. So sometime in the course of our career, you could lose your job. You could you could move around. You don't really have that protection. But one good thing is our career, it comes from a passion. So I've always been passionate around social justice and social work. And when I came to Canada and started studying social work, through my interaction with Senator Wanda, I learned a lot about the history of African Nova Scotians in Canada. And also from my study of social work, I learned a lot about the history of the indigenous people of Canada. The first experience I would share, my first epiphany or the first shock I had around Canada was when I was coming to Canada. I migrated from Nigeria to Canada. When I was coming, all my friends, family members, when they escorted me to the airport, they said, "Oh, bye, you're going to a white man's land." And that was my impression. So when my first 2 weeks of social work, I went for an event in the Indian Friendship Center in Halifax. And when I went there, I saw people speaking in a different language. I saw people doing some ceremony, smooching, a couple of things. And I was shocked. Then a lot of those traditions were connected to the tradition I experienced back home in Nigeria, like, libation and all those things. So I started to ask questions. And that was when I was clearly told that the indigenous people of Canada, the owners of Canada, everybody is like an immigrant. And at that point, I was like, wow. Because when you come to my home community in Nigeria, for you to be accepted in as someone from that community, you have to learn a dialect first. So our dialect remains supreme. So for the fact that we don't even speak indigenous languages in the streets of Canada, it kind of gave me a reminder of the oppression that the indigenous people of Canada have faced. Then we go back. So these things kind of gave me that motivating factor to not just be a social worker, but to be an advocate as I do my work in social work. When I graduated from the School of Social Work, I worked with Association of Black Social Workers. Senator Wanda and I, we did a couple of community events, focus groups, some on problem gambling and some on other issues, including racism that affected African Nova Scotian community. From there, I navigated my career. I worked with Nova Scotia Community College. I worked with the hospital. But everywhere in my career, I worked as a social worker helping people. I experienced systemic racism. And through my experience of systemic racism, I started to question, am I going to remain as a clinical social worker while supporting people and dealing with this? Or am I going to move to a position where I would change the system? And that was what led me to what I'm doing today. So I'm a diversity and inclusion specialist with the City of Ottawa. So part of what I do today, it's as a result of my experience. My long experience as a Black male, my experience working with African Nova Scotia community and seeing the experience of African Nova Scotians in Canada, my experience working with the indigenous community, and my personal experience. So today I work in the City of Ottawa. I work on developing policies and procedures that would make the city more inclusive, and policies and procedures that would help the city bridge gaps that the systemic oppression or the system have caused generationally. So that's what I do. So in social work, for us to be more inclusive, we have to look at all these aspects. So I'm very invested in continue working with Senator Wanda and everyone. Most times, the last time I met with Senator Wanda, I had a very long discussion around the Employment Equity Act. And I was, through my job, I started questioning why is it that we don't have a Black category in the Employment Equity Act. I just felt that we didn't have Blacks on the table. Why do we lump Blacks as part of the civil minority? So I was really concerned because I found out that through my job, issues that directly deal with Blacks are not really dealt with, despite the history of Blacks in Canada and North America. Despite the fact that there's no way you talk about racism that you don't connect Blacks because of the history of Blacks around slavery and colonization, Then we spoke about emancipation, and I was so excited last week when I read that there was a vote, unanimous vote to declare August 1st as Emancipation Day. And when I saw that, I said, I'm sure Senator Wanda has done a lot of work on this too. So I said, it's a good thing. So there's hope that one day would have a category for blacks in the Employment Equity Act. There will be an opportunity to review that act, to amend that act, so that I have a category for blacks and LGBTQ plus in that act. So that's what I'm looking. So as a social worker, I do personal advocacy, I do systemic advocacy, and I also work with individuals in the city that experience oppression, discrimination, racism, and not just racism, even people that experience abusing and people that experience gender discrimination. I work with everyone in the city. So that's just my background. Thank you.
Anderson. Oh, hang on. Oh, I'm on.
Okay.
Can you hear us, Senator Anderson? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. All right. Akana, I'm speaking to you from my home community of Tuktoyaktuk, the traditional territory of the Inuvialuit. It is my pleasure to introduce Susan Fitzke. She lives on the shores of the Great Slave Lake on Chief Dragi's territory, the traditional home of the Yellowknife's Dene in Yellowknife Northwest Territories. Originally from Prince Edward Island, Susan has called Yellowknife home for more than a decade and lives there with her partner and her 2 school-aged children. Susan was highly recommended by the Department of Health and Social Services, the Government of the Northwest Territories, for her work, dedication, and commitment to social work in the Northwest Territories. Although Susan and I have not met in person, we have spent time together on the phone and become fast friends, discussing our shared love and admiration for social work and social justice. Susan holds a bachelor's degree in women's studies and psychology from the University of Prince Edward Island and a Master of Social Work specializing in leadership in human services from the University of Calgary. Susan was an instructor and associate professor for the Diploma of Social Work program from Aurora College in partnership with the University of Regina. Susan has been an NWT director for the Association of Social Workers in Northern Canada since 2015. In 2018, she was a recipient of the Canadian Association of Social Work's Distinguished Social Service Award for the Northwest Territories for her commitment and dedication to transformation in child welfare. Susan loves the outdoors. She and her young family can usually be found outside, regardless of the season. She loves bonfires, paddling, and camping on the lake surrounding Yellowknife in the midnight sun. During the winter, she enjoys cross-country skiing with frozen lashes or playing with the kids around the site of the annual and popular snow castle, where her partner is part of a crew that builds the castle. So thank you, and thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Thank you so much. It is really an honor to be part of the panel here today. So thank you, Senator Anderson, for inviting me to join you and the others on the panel here. And thank you to CASW for offering this webinar to celebrate Social Work Month. It is something I feel it's really important to lift up the spirits of social workers around Canada who are persisting through, not only just the challenges we have in Canada but also during a pandemic. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So as mentioned, I'm an MSW trained social worker with a background in women's studies. So thinking about why social work, as a young person, I showed the beginnings of a lifelong commitment to social justice. I always had a curiosity about what was happening outside of my own little universe on the Pleasant Grove Road in Prince Edward Island, and wanted to understand what other people were experiencing and how I could be part of that. I had an early commitment to figuring out, how do I be part of making things better? Really understanding that there was a need for us all to act. As an undergraduate student in women's studies, I began to understand that social work could be a great place for me to find a profession that would allow me to always be connected and activated to my commitment to social justice. So I was thrilled when I began my studies in social work and found that, we, as social workers, we make a lifelong commitment to continue to advocate and to learn more about what's happening. Now, these days, I find myself inspired by the people and the land here in the Northwest Territories. I have been welcomed here as a white settler from down south, as we say. I have a deep appreciation for the warmth of the welcome that I received here. And in return, I am more committed than ever to helping our profession continue moving in the direction of reconciliation and social justice. To me, this means activating my listening skills and always searching for ways to amplify the voices that we need to be listening to. So as we know, advocacy is at the core of our practice in social work. Advocacy can happen at many different levels. As Principal explained, he advocates at many levels across the system. As a macro social worker, I'm looking at the structures. I'm curious about the systems, the policies, the programs, and the legislations as places for advocacy and change. I am inspired to see social workers in government, specifically in the Senate, as we see reflected here today. What an honor for all of us to know that the voices of our profession are resonated at the Senate level. Another tangible action that I see as a locus for hope, particularly in these strange times, is the new federal act that has come out. So I work predominantly in child and family services. I have a very deep commitment to the transformation that needs to happen there. And the new federal act is a place where we can find inspiration. The new act is an act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families. To give some context to that, the purpose of this act is to affirm the inherent right to self-government. It sets out principles applicable to the provision of child and family services in relation to Indigenous children, and also commits to make contributions to the implementation of UNDRIP, or the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The principles of this act are circled around the best interests of the child, cultural continuity, and substantive equality. Now, these are dense topics, right? So to really let that resonate, what are we talking about when we think about cultural continuity? What does it mean for a system to value substantive equality? So we're looking at equitable outcomes, equal opportunities. We're really needing to let these ideas marinate in the decisions that we make at all levels of government. The new federal act, if implemented effectively and meaningfully, could be an important step towards reconciliation in Canada. But as we know, legislation on its own is not enough. I am part of the Child and Family Services system in the Northwest Territories, and we can see examples of the changes to Child and Family Services practice as a result of this legislation. So for example, this legislation means that Indigenous governing bodies are protected to exercise without discrimination their right as Indigenous people, community, and as Indigenous groups. So in the Northwest Territories, the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation has already given notice of its intention to exercise legislative authority in relation to child and family services. I am confident that there will be more notices coming forward. So for social workers, both on the front line and in leadership positions, you will be at the heart of activating change in relation to this act. When we see the involvement of Indigenous governing bodies as a standard practice in child and family services, and when decisions involving First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children are always made in partnership with Indigenous governing bodies, then there can be real change to the ways in which we are supporting children, families, and communities who are dealing with the outcomes of oppression and marginalization. Now, without true collaboration and partnership, the kinds of support or interventions that we offer through child and family services will continue to fall short. Transformation is made possible through respectful relationships with Indigenous governing bodies, people, and community. So I am inspired by our senator in the Northwest Territories. She's an Indigenous woman from Tuktoyaktuk, and the perspective that she brings to her work at the Senate is crucial to the work that can happen. In order for Canada to do the work of reconciliation and the work of building a safer, more equitable reality for all Canadians, we need voices like Senator Anderson's in leadership. Indigenous people and people of color need to see themselves reflected at all levels of society, and especially in positions of leadership. As a non-Indigenous person, I would like to see and hear less from those with similar life experience to my own. I cannot help but draw parallels from the sentiment I expressed about my enthusiasm and passion as a young person seeking to learn more about what was happening outside of my own reality and finding ways to help and finding ways to act. But the North has taught me that one of the best ways that I can be an ally is to listen more, to believe what I'm hearing, and to find ways to amplify voices. Now, for those of you who are on the call as students, first of all, welcome to the profession. You have chosen a really beautiful profession to be part of. And my advice to you really comes from advice that I probably received as a new social worker, and I wish I had listened to more strongly, is that as you set out into your practice, herald back to your most foundational communication skills. Really, we need to listen more than we talk. And that means being present and active in your listening. You never know who is going to share a pearl of wisdom that may transform your practice in social work. I think it's important to be brave enough to ask questions, especially when you're unsure or challenged by something that you're hearing. However, sometimes it can be more powerful to wait for the understanding or illumination to happen. I'd like to share some of my own experience here in the Northwest Territories in working with elders. So sometimes when I'm working with an elder, I may think that the lesson I'm learning is how to fillet a fish. And so I'm there and I want to know how to do it, and it's a really useful skill. And so I'm listening to what I'm being told. But later in the day, I may realize that the lesson I was being taught there was not about filleting a fish. It was about something more profound, something deeper than just filleting the fish, but it's presented in a really accessible way to me. Now, coming back to those listening skills, it's only by activating a really attentive listening that I can reflect back and realize, oh, there was something larger being shared with me there. So that's my advice for social workers emerging into the practice, is just be really open to what you can learn. And really for all of us in our practice to go back to those core skills. What can I learn here? What is it here that I need to really hear? And so I welcome you into the profession, students, and I hope you can remind us to open our active listening skills and to allow that to bring us forward in our practice. Thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, that was such great discussion. You know, I often think about if we were making soup, that's a really rich broth. There's so much in there, right? And being from Canada, we appreciate good soup. So this is really good soup, I have to say. We've got some people who've been asking some questions, and so I'm going to toss it out. Maybe I'll start and ask one of the panelists to start, but whoever would like to join in and also answer, if you had something you'd like to add, I think that would be awesome. So our first question actually is from Heather, and she says, what do you see as the fallout and our greatest challenge coming post-COVID? I like the fact she said post-COVID. So Rina, what about you? What do you think what the biggest challenge is going to be coming post-COVID?
I think coming post-COVID, we'll need to reflect on a new way of social working. I think that they always will need to have, there's certainly a springboard, and they'll spring us forward, but we need to think differently. This is our first and not our last. So we need to know what we've learned, go back, listen, and hear from the people that we work with, and then bring those learning forward for the next one. Let's us be prepared. We are not only on the ground, we are at the top of that hill. And we need to bring whatever we've learned to that knowledge to propulse us forward and to be better. Because let's face it, I have done a mental health review board via Zoom with people that are the most vulnerable and already have difficulty. And here we are on the TV trying to get them to understand that we're really there for them. Like we need to learn from this and do it better next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone like to add anything else? Okay. All right. We will move on to another question. So this ties in actually to that question, I think, and that how do you think social work will be essential as we look towards a just recovery? So, Princewell?
Me, as a black male, I identify myself as a black male, and I've worked across different spectrum of social work, and including supporting senior leadership around creating more inclusive spaces and changing policies that would improve representation of groups that have been less represented or non-represented within workforce for years. For a just change to happen, we need we need to train social workers in a way that they look at themselves as being in leadership position. There's a lot of power around leadership. And in School of Social Work, there's a lot of focus around front line. And that leadership piece sometimes is not a strong message that is sent to students, when you're taking social work. It comes sometimes from individual passion or from people's experience. So I think for social work to be more strategic in looking at just change, we need to start putting more energy in training around leadership, preparing social workers to be in leadership position. We are here today having these discussions because we have social workers like all of you in the Senate. And imagine the change that you're bringing through with your social work lens in the Senate. If you come to hospitals, you see a lot of manager positions. You don't see social workers. You see nurses, you see doctors, you see OTs, but social workers are not really in leadership position. You come to the city where I work, you don't see a lot of social workers in leadership position. They're all there in the front line. But for a just change to be made, the recommendation of the frontline workers need to be affected by leadership that's out of the box. And social workers, we already trained to be out of the box, but we need to start changing social workers' mindset to move towards leadership, so that our out of box experience that's always at the frontline level could be manifested in changes around policies and procedures, because that's where the change has a bigger effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone like to add in? And that includes the senators. Yes. Senator Bernard.
Sorry, I couldn't get my sound turned on. I absolutely agree with that. Princewell, and I want to build on it. I think two things I want to share. One, I think in terms of the way we teach social work and the way we're teaching policy, we create silos. So I think we need to teach differently and teach that frontline and policy and research are all interconnected. And so we need to stop thinking about them as separate entities, but really look at how we integrate them into all of what we're teaching. And the point I'll make about leadership, to build on what you've shared, I absolutely agree with you there that we need to encourage social workers to enter more leadership positions, as you have done. However, even beyond that, we need to think about leadership a little differently. So leadership is not just about the position that you hold. It's not about the title that you hold, but leadership is actually about the work that you do. So I'd like to see us help people develop more of their leadership skills that they have. So even talks that I do with young people in high schools and so on, I talk about leadership. I talk about that engagement. And part of that engagement is really about helping people discover the leadership ability they have within themselves. We even do that with our grandsons who are quite young. So the messages about leadership need to start earlier and need to be integrated throughout the careers in social work and other fields as well.
It's really interesting points, I have to say. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say on that topic? No. I agree with you, both of you, actually.
If I may.
Yes, go right ahead. Yes.
If I may, I think that one thing that we forget, and I agree with you, Senator, we need to teach leadership, but we also need to teach how awesome social workers are. We forget that. I mean, one little piece in media and we lose all of the good that we've done. And so we need to look at it differently, and we need to really always tell each other how awesome we are. You know, moving forward, understanding the impact we have, not only on people, but mostly on people, but on policy, on programs, on services, and trying to be there for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Interesting. Very interesting conversation there. I'm going to give this one to Susan. And Anne has asked the question, how do you maintain your energy in the pursuit of social justice? Because this is not an easy road. So how do you maintain your energy, your drive, your passion?
Well, you know, I have a really spunky 6-year-old at home who helps me to remember you got to get up ready for your day. Every day is a new one. And really, I think it's about finding those moments that build your spirit, that feel like, okay, we're moving forward here, not spending all our time in the, oh my gosh, are we still talking about this? Is this how far we've come? But really looking for what are the wins? What are the opportunities? So, you know, in talking about the federal legislation's not going to fix what we have going on here in Canada for First Nations, Métis and Inuit children, but it's an opportunity. And so to see the opportunity and to push like heck when you can, that's going to keep you fired up to continue in the pursuit of social justice. You know, and I think that it's okay to get tired and it's okay to think, I need a little pause. I'm feeling a bit burnt here. And then to find another place to dig your heels in and to get energized. Because there is a lot happening, right? Look at our panel today. There are opportunities to see that things are changing. You know, for me, when I was chatting with Senator Anderson, we went on the website and I was looking at the Senate, and I was happy to see that it wasn't just white middle class men on the Senate. Is there room for growth? Absolutely. But I could see, okay, look, things are changing. We're moving in a good direction. So we just got to keep going, right?
Perfect. Anybody else like to add in?
Yes, I could
Absolutely.
add. Like
Go
that.
ahead.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Susan. I think that was a great thing that you said. One of the things that I think we need to do is self-care. And whether we're a social worker or whatever, is because if you don't have, you know, if your tank is empty or burned, then you can't really give to others. And I think we forget that. We just keep going. Excuse me. And sometimes we just need to take that time. Also to have people in our circle that can positively help us and talk to us and mentor us and things like that. So I think that's important as well.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? I used to work with someone who used to say to students,
that we need to.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay, Joan. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say I used to work with someone, and when she worked with students, she used to. No, please go ahead. We have a lag happening, so that's part of this whole process and joy of being on Zoom. So please go ahead, Rina.
Sorry, Joan. Sorry. I really didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to say, I think that the very important, Susan, when you said you've got to, you got to remember that change has happened. If you always look at the negative, you'll never be able to see all the positive that has happened. Now, just my life, all the things that has happened for women, I'll take women for in particular, but all that we've gained in one generation is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like if I look at my mother, they couldn't vote, but we can vote today. If I look at myself, I couldn't even have a credit card when I started working. I needed my father's signature to have a loan. So, there's a lot of things that we have gained. If I only look at the negative of what I still have to do, I will lose that energy. And you're never alone. You're never alone. We're in this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This question, I guess, is for one of our senators. The viewers asked this question. So maybe Senator Anderson, if you wanted to start. How did your work as a social worker influence the policy and legislation that you now work on?
I think my work as a social worker has influenced everything I do. I believe that a lot of the way that I work as a social worker is also impacted by the way I was brought up in the Inuvialuit culture. And the impact of, or the influence of my nanak and dadak. Growing up in Tuktoyaktuk, where the majority is Inuvialuit, and growing up understanding that everyone looked after each other, that my caretakers didn't just include a mother and a father, it very much included my nanak, dadak, aunties, uncles, cousins, whether they were in Tuk or in another community. So I grew up in a community where there was a responsibility for each other. And I think that has definitely shaped who I am. It shaped who I was in social work. Even going into social work and doing the work of a social worker, I worked in my home community, which for those of you who do, I acknowledge sometimes it's very difficult. It is extremely challenging. It is difficult when you have to go in a home and you're responsible to take care of or remove children of relatives, which I have had to do in the past. It definitely presents new challenges, but I think all of that comes with me in my role as social work. So it's all that I've learned throughout the years. It's that sense of responsibility for each other as human beings. It's that sense of accountability to the Inuvialuit. It's that sense of accountability to Indigenous people, to understand my history. I believe that as individuals, no matter where we are, we should understand our history. We should know what has impacted the generations that came before us. We should know our stories. Those are the stories that shape who we are today. And so I would have to say that it's a combination of everything, from growing up, from my professional career as a social worker with the Department of Justice. But I would say for me, my key grounding is definitely my home community of Tuktoyaktuk, which is actually where I am right now. And I come home to get grounded. I find that this is the place that I feel my strongest, my safest. So I would say that no matter where you are in life, take what you have learned. It follows you. It is what propels you. It is what gives you strength, and it's what gives you voice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone like to add to that?
Just a brief comment.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in social work. I've been a social worker for 45 years and a senator for 4.5 years. Everything that I've done in social work has prepared me for what I have to do in the Senate. And so it's been wonderful. So I'm a social worker who's moonlighting as a senator. I want to pick up on a point that Princewell alluded to. He talked about being on the front lines of social work and working with people who were experiencing the trauma of racism, and how he turned the pain of that trauma of racism and also his own experiences, how he turned the pain of that trauma into a career in social policy, into a career for social justice. And I would say that's exactly what I've done. There are so many experiences along the way that were meant to shut me down, to shut me out, to exclude me. And those experiences, they didn't make me bitter. They've made me better. They've made me stronger. And they've made me more determined to keep fighting for change, to keep fighting for those policies and for the implementation of policies in a way that really moves people, in a way that really moves communities, in a way that really moves the issues so that we all benefit. So that's what my social work career has helped me to do now in my Senate career.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I want to jump into that, I want to connect what Rina had said and Senator Wanda and Senator Rina. There are two things, you spoke, Rina, you said something around looking at the positive, more than the negative. I think that's very important for social workers. And I learned a lot from that with Senator Wanda, there was an experience that Senator Wanda had in the course of her career that the whole blacks in Nova Scotia, the whole Nova Scotia were ready to protest. But Senator Wanda said, no, don't go that direction. And she walked around dialogue. And not quite long after that experience, an announcement was made that she's a senator, and an announcement was made she's a senator, and a senator is even bigger than whatever that experience is, But the process of dialogue and the approach that Senator Wanda used to deal with that has a cause of change in that institution today. There's a big change in that institution because of that approach, And I learned a lot from that. In my current career, I'm not bragging, but I'm one of the diversity and inclusion specialists that every white in leadership can tell anything. Even if they said a racist word, they can share it with me confidently and say, how do I fix this? And it's because of that dialogue approach, In my presentation with leadership, I tell them, look, I'm not perfect. No one is perfect. I'm a black male. My experience as black does not even represent all blacks. I'm bound to mistakes. So instead of you not being part of the social change because of the fear of the mistake you make and what people will say against you, be part of the social change as a leader. Be ready to make that mistake. Be ready to apologize, acknowledge your mistakes, and we'll deal with that. And I see them giving me feedback. Well, I don't want to be involved because I don't know when to say the right thing or the wrong thing. But just listening to you, Prince Will, I can now say things, even if I make mistakes. I'm willing to learn. And in the course of advocacy, one advocate from that lens where people would listen to us. You don't want to be an advocate that people will not want to listen to, because if people don't listen to you, you can make change. You want to come from that lens, especially when you're within the system. If you're outside the system, it's a little different. If you're within the system, you want to advocate strategically where people would see you as someone that uses dialogue effectively and someone that is non-judgmental. We already trained on how not to be non-judgmental. It's difficult for not to be non-judgmental, but if you keep it to your heart and it's not shown, it doesn't reflect in your actions, it could work better for you as a social worker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have about a minute left. I can't believe this. Time goes so fast on these panels. It's unbelievable. One person has asked this question, and if anyone would like to give a quick response. Have you ever doubted or thought, I need to change my career from social work? And if you did have those thoughts, what stopped you from doing it, or what inspired you to continue on? So if someone would like to, or a couple would like to jump in quickly, I think that would be very helpful for some of our people who are listening today?
Let me jump in really quick. I'm sure I'm jumping in because of my personal experience. I said when I studied social work, I was looking at being a therapist, physiotherapist, so clinical social worker. I did that. My experience made me, I moved on to different area. Today I work on policy and procedures. And as a social worker, you have the capacity to work in any field. So you don't even need to change your career as a social worker. You just need to change your job. That's what I would say. Thank you.
There we go. Rina, what about you? Have you ever had any doubts about the career choice?
No, I had doubts when I was not a social worker. I started in psychiatry way many moons ago. And that's when I realized that in order to change, to action change, we need to be social workers. Because we are, a psychiatry, psychologist, wonderful professions. But if you want to actually bring change, the profession of social worker will bring you there. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Susan, what about you?
I'm going to be really honest. I question it all the time. I'm in child and family services. The legacy is ominous, right? It's very daunting. This work is daunting work. I'm in the Northwest Territories. We have a history here that is pretty intimidating to face. And so, I contemplate where's the best place for me to be in trying to transform child welfare. And similar to what Principal was saying, I changed the angle sometimes, right? So I started in child and family services, and then I went over to the college and taught child welfare there, really thinking and working with students about what does transformation look like? How do we achieve this? Let's propose ideas. And then found myself back here working with the authority in child and family services. And, sometimes we have to do that when we're facing a really big issue, right? Or a really big problem. You need to come at it from different angles and figure out where can I be most effective? And it's okay. I always find myself back pushing for change in child welfare. So I may as well just stop asking the question maybe, but it's okay for me.
All right. Senator Hartling, have you ever had doubts about what was your chosen career?
Not really. I loved being a social worker. I loved working in the community. I probably had more doubts in the Senate because it's a different form, to work in, and so I'm glad people like Wanda and Senator Anderson are there so that I could talk to them about these issues because it's a different way of working. But no, I've always loved being in the community, and it built me up. It's just learning to work in new ways in the Senate and always bring those social work practices and skills to it. And I think we're doing it. We're gradually learning how to do that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Senator Anderson, what about you?
I've definitely had those thoughts. Being like I said earlier about working in your home community as a social worker, my home community is 900. It was extremely difficult. I was very young. And when we did social work, we didn't just do child and family services. We did aged and handicapped. We did income support. We did native custom adoption. We did probation, and we did parole. So it was you wore a lot of hats. There's definitely a lot of challenges. I actually did shift from social work about 4.5 years in to the Department of Justice and shifted strictly to probation and parole and moved to Yellowknife. I think sometimes thinking about change is a healthy thing. It doesn't mean that you abandoned everything that you've worked with or the people that you've worked with, because in my career and as a social worker and as a professional in the Northwest Territories, I have worked with 3 generations of the same families. So I think that role that you start with is usually applied in other areas, but you still continue that work.
Okay, perfect. The closing words, Senator Thomas Bernard?
I'll just say 45 years in, I have never had any regret about social work. And one of the things I missed when I was no longer director of the School of Social Work is that every year at orientation, I would talk to the students about the passion that I felt when I came in 45 years ago and the passion that I still have. And that passion is what fuels your energy to keep going, even on those days when you feel you can't. So, yeah. Social work is essential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely is. Absolutely is. I'd like to thank each and every one of our panelists today for their words, for their honesty, and for their insight when it comes to the important topics that we deal with as social workers. And this conversation has been such a good conversation that I really appreciate each of you giving the time and energy today to come and to bring your guests. That was awesome. And I hope that we can do it again. And everyone has an opportunity to enjoy the rest of Social Work Month. I think we have a few hours left between now and tomorrow. And thank you so much for all your insight and your thoughts. Thank you again, everyone, and happy Social Work Month. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.